We are live on YouTube. Hello, friends. So it's been a little while just because had a couple things last week. My niece was married, and so that's exciting. Had one person comment and say, like, how are you old enough to have a niece that's married? Well, my oldest sister, I think, is 15 years older than I am, and she was married at 19 and had a baby like a year later. That's not the niece who is married. That niece has two children. So yeah, I actually have a niece and a nephew who were already married. My niece has two children and my nephew has one. And then now this is my third niece to get married. So anyway, fun stuff. I have a big family and a wide range of ages. That oldest niece, actually, we were at BYU for a year together. I was in my last year and she was in her freshman year. So yeah, it's fun. Anyway, we are back and we are here to do office hours. So let me open up the office hours page really quick and share my screen. And move some Zoom stuff around because it just never knows how I want my screen set up, no matter how much I fix it every time. Office hours is your opportunity to ask me any question that you like, and I reserve the right to not answer certain questions and to boot you if it is against the code of conduct. So not anything, but yeah, it's mostly for me so that I'm not nerd sniped every day, many times in the day, by lots of interesting and fascinating questions by people. So this is your opportunity to nerd snipe the heck out of me so I can help and answer in any way that I can. The way that we run this is I answer questions from people who are actually in the Zoom meeting, and then I go through the Discord channel to answer questions here. So, and I just got a message from Jacob I'm going to look at really quick. It should be quick. Yeah, just a thanks. Yeah, anyway, I think that's it. I think where we left off was, yeah, right around here. So Aaron's question is where we're going to start in the Discord. But anybody in the Zoom have a question they'd like to kick us off on?
Yeah, actually, I've got a question in the Discord fairly recently.
Oh, okay. I'll scroll right to it. Actually, I don't know why I moved this out of here. That's not you, right?
No.
You look nothing like that picture.
Pretty close to the bottom of
Oh,
everything.
is it this one?
I do have that question, but it's less important to me than the most recent question.
Oh, okay.
Pull up.
Oh, there it is. Found it.
Yep, from this morning.
Oh, right. Yeah. So I might need you to share your screen with me, but so that you can walk me through it. But let me just take a look and see what I can find about this. So we've got a test where we've got this render with providers login form thing. We're starting up our server, closing it down, avoid memory leaks. It's all good. We enter our username and hit submit. Okay, sweet. As soon as it gets the GraphQL mutation, it can't find a matching operation in handlers and crashes. Now that's interesting. We're getting an Apollo error. No more mocked responses for this query. Is this message coming from Apollo or MSW?
I'm not sure actually. We can take a look.
Yeah, I know that Apollo has their own mocking functionality and packages, and so my guess is so is this message, this is part of the message, right? The error message.
No, that's just my note there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so my guess is actually Apollo maybe has some of its mocking set up, and so it never actually gets to the MSW handlers, which is why this might be happening. So we can probably, and this may be set up without your knowledge because you're based on the Next.js package or example, right? So they may have set this up and you don't know. Looks like there's nothing in there. Here, let's look at the package JSON because I know it's a separate package.
Yeah, this is a repo that I kind of hacked together using one of Vercel's examples and one of MSW's examples.
Got it.
It's
Yeah,
kind of
it
a
doesn't look
weird.
like you have the Apollo mocking thing. I've never used it before, but I'm pretty sure it's a totally separate package. Just
The one that's under at Apollo/client/testing.
Oh, okay. So it's not a separate package.
I think it's under /testing. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in that case, I doubt that we've got. Yeah. Okay. Yep. There it is. It's in the helpers. So the mocked provider right here is going to mock any Apollo request. And so you would need to, you have to choose one or the other. So you're, because this mock provider is set up, MSW will never get called because you're not actually making fetch requests. I would recommend getting rid of the mocked provider and using MSW because I think that you get more confidence out of that. And I've never used this mock provider thing before, but I'm guessing it's not as easy to use as MSW is. I don't know, maybe it is, but it still, you get more confidence with MSW. So that's what I would do. Just get rid of the mock provider and things should work.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, we had tried using the mock provider and supplying it the mocks object that it expects, but you have to be very explicit with what gets requested and what gets responded with, and it's kind of painful to use. So we're hoping to switch to MSW, but I didn't know that you couldn't use like both at the same time. So getting rid of mock provider and using just MSW might work then.
Yeah, it should.
Okay.
And one other tip is you don't want to use the wrapper like this. What you should do instead is call render with the UI, and then as a second argument to render, you have the options object, and there's a wrapper property there that you can set, and that's where you would put the mocked provider wrapper. And the benefit of that is render returns a re-render function, and when you call re-render, you can pass some different UI, and it will still be wrapped in the wrapper. Whereas with this mechanism, you would have to manually wrap it in the wrapper again when you call re-render. It's not very often that you call re-render, but when you do, it is confusing if it's not wrapped in that wrapper that the original thing was wrapped in. So yeah, anyway, hopefully that's helpful. One thing that I would say is I don't believe that MSW does validation of your queries. And actually that's based on something I just learned about from, I think it was the Beginner's Guide to React. Somebody opened an issue about this and we decided we couldn't really do anything about it. But yeah, so in the Beginner's Guide to React, I demonstrate an error boundary by changing the query to break the query. For example, trying to get a property that doesn't exist for that resource. And that worked in my video because I was using a real API, but then that API was removed and no longer worked. And so I decided to switch to MSW, and that ends up being better anyway, so it can all be offline. But when people try to do this themselves, if they're following along or something, then it doesn't work because MSW doesn't do any validation of the query and the resources and stuff because it's not actually a GraphQL server. So that's one thing to keep in mind is you're not going to get, with MSW, you're not going to get confidence of that. I don't know if Apollo just gives you that out of the box. It might, and so maybe that's not a concern for you, but that would be something to check once you have MSW set up. Just see if your test will break when you are requesting a field that doesn't exist.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Sweet. All right, Lucas, I see you in here. And I noticed a couple of your questions. So I'll go, actually, sorry, Brody, you had another question. Let me get that one answered first, and then I'll come back to you, Lucas.
Okay.
All right.
Cool. Okay. Recommend structuring integration tests in a large project, have a single file. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I definitely would not have a single file for all of the integration tests. The way that I do things is I'm not a fan of, let's see, nesting, avoid nesting when you're testing. So should I thread this? Should I do that? No, that's stupid. Let's just do a reply. We're not going to have a conversation. I'm going to talk right here. So anyway, this blog post will be useful for this, where I pretty much do not use describe blocks. I find them to be unnecessary. It's and the nesting itself, like describe blocks and nesting different things, leads to tests that are just really difficult to follow and track and understand what's going on and stuff. It's no fun. So I don't do describe blocks even like at all. And often I'll see somebody have a single describe block. So if we're testing this login component, for example, they'll have a single describe block that's like login works or something like describe login. And then they'll have all of their tests inside of that describe block. And that confuses me because the file name is literally test login. So I don't understand why, why you need to describe login. Like clearly that's what we're here for. So I don't do any describe blocks most of the time. Sometimes it can be useful, but most of the time I don't do describe blocks. I put everything at the root. And so what I do to have separation, because separation can be useful, is I literally create separate files. And so for like integration tests, when we're talking about test co-location and stuff, we want to have it as close to what it's relevant as possible. But when you're doing an integration test, that's like a page, right? And so I would put it close to the page. Now, I don't work in Next apps, and so I'm not sure what your limitations are with regard to like where you can put test files, but you want to put it as close to the route that you're trying to test as you can. And if that means you have like a test directory that mirrors it, because like that doesn't work. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know Next, but yeah, anyway, then if you have like a bunch of tests for that route for some reason, or maybe you want to render the entire app, so you have a bunch of tests at the root or something, then you could split them up by file name. And what I typically do, can't think of an example of this, but or like a place where I can show you an example of when I've done this. I think I have yeah, I think maybe my testing node apps repo has an example of this. I can't remember, but I'll do something like settings dot profile or dot tsx or whatever. So that'd be tests, and then I'd have another one that would be like tests settings dot whatever dot tsx. Just kind of that's kind of how I separate the different categories of tests for a particular page or whatever. And that works out really well. Yeah, one per file. Yep, just as you said here. I should have finished reading your question. So good luck. Any examples of implementing integration tests for a large project? My best, yeah, I think probably my best open source example of this. I did this a lot at PayPal, but clearly that's not open source. So the best that I've got for you is in the Bookshelf app as part of Epic React. And you can find it in the book screen here. And so this is actually one example where I do have a describe block, and it's so that I can separate the before all and after all here for these console errors, because I don't want the console error to be mocked for these tests, but I do want it for these tests where I'm making sure that when errors happen, things are logged to the console and stuff like that. So this is probably it's not very large. It's 226 lines of code. So probably not exactly what you're looking for, but maybe it will sort of help.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. Okay, sweet. Now, Lucas, I can get to your questions. Now, I think I saw one of your questions up, or I've seen a couple of your questions recently.
No, it's only one. So earlier today.
Oh, is this the one? Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yep, that's the one.
Okay. Sweet. So this is a very common question, and I really need to write a blog post about this. In fact, I think it's like at the top of my list of blog posts to write. Folks may have noticed that I haven't written a blog post in quite some time. It's because I've been working on my website, and I just decided let's cut out all of the extra stuff that I do. So I haven't done any 3 minutes with Kent or blog posts for a few weeks, and that will change. We'll be doing a lot more of that sort of thing once the website's done. But yeah, this is one of the blog posts that I'm going to write because I get this question a lot, and it's a very good question. So the reason that we put our stuff in use layout effect is, or use effect would work, but I like use layout effect for this because it's not going to slow anything down, and it will ensure that this happens before any other use effects happen, which it probably doesn't matter, but it can, like there's situations. So may as well just use layout effect. Okay, so why do we need to put it in an effect? Well, first of all, you need to remember the rule of the body of your function component is do not have any side effects at all. Mutating a ref, that is a side effect. Now, that's the rule. Why is this the rule? Why is this important? So it's important for concurrent features. We don't call it concurrent mode anymore. It's concurrent features. And with React version 18, you can opt into, and it's still in alpha, I think. It's still in beta. I mean, I can't remember if they call it alpha or beta, but it's not officially released yet. But with concurrent features, you can, what can happen is React will call your function as it's going through and rendering based on some state update. So it calls your function. When it calls your function, you're going to be updating the ref.current value to, whatever the latest value of something is. And then React gets all those elements, but they're not on the page yet. It has to commit those to the DOM. It has to do the diffing algorithm, commit those to the DOM. Let's say that as it's doing all of that, there is a user event. The user is typing really fast in an input or something. And so there's a key press that happens. With concurrent features, to reduce the lag, React will actually say, React actually constantly checks and says, hey, do you need me to do something that's higher priority than what I'm doing right now? And it just keeps doing that. And once that key press comes in, it says, yes, actually, I do have something that's really important I need you to do right now. So React says, okay, let's just throw this stuff away. Or I think it's a little smarter than that. And it like tries to store some of it, but it effectively throws it away is what you should be thinking of it as. And especially it will throw it away if the change that now happens will impact that, then it absolutely will throw that work away. And so what happens in that situation? Well, okay, so let's finish that. So then it handles this event, and then maybe there's a state update that happens or something, and then it goes through and renders based on that. And so what is going to happen in that case is you're going to say, okay, so let's render this. Let's update this value to something that's relevant for this render, and then that work gets thrown away, and it's going to and so it was never committed to the DOM. It never actually existed for the user, and then we come back here to render again, and now we're updating the ref.current to another value. So what you did the first time was you updated the ref current value to a latest thing that actually was never the latest thing. It's not a thing. And in most cases, especially like something simple like this, that's not going to be a problem. It's no big deal. I mean, we're literally setting it to the same value every time. But normally in a practical situation, you're setting it to the latest version of a callback or something like that. And so what could happen is you could say, okay, let's set this to the latest version of a callback function. And then some event comes in to interrupt the rendering. So we never actually commit that update. And maybe that event is going to trigger something to happen, which will say, oh, I need to call the latest callback. Well, that latest callback you have doesn't actually exist yet. It's not actually been committed as a finished render. And so you're calling a callback that may have come from a render that is thrown away. And I'm not sure, like it's hard to describe or think about what bugs that would cause, but it would be even harder to debug that problem and try like to reproduce it in the first place would be really difficult. And so it's best to just stay away from that problem entirely by putting all side effects. Just always follow the rule. Side effects go in a use effect or a use layout effect. And then you'll never have this problem because React will throw away the renders, but it will never call these callbacks until it's committed. It's like, oh, we will not get interrupted. This is going into the DOM. Or actually, in the case of use effects, these have gone into the DOM. We've finished that part. And now we're going to call your code so you can update it. So that is why, and this is why I need to write a blog post about this, because it is a great question and really common. And I see this all the time. People just kind of do it naturally. Now, there are exceptions to this. Yeah, I've got more to say about this, I guess. So if you want to set a ref to some, so let's say use ref like thing, right? That'll set it to some value. And if you never update it, it will stay at that value forever. So that can be useful for if you just want to have a stable value that never changes and you can put it inside of a use effect and not have to set it in dependencies or whatever. You just want to have it as a stable value. Now, what if what you're doing is new mutation observer or something like that, right? What's going to happen then is every render you're creating a new mutation observer or intersection observer or whatever it is. That's not great. We don't like that because it's just wasteful. We only need one, right? Because even though we have set this the first time, JavaScript still operates and it still needs to create that new mutation observer to pass it to the useRef function. And useRef is going to ignore it after the first render. So it's like, okay, whatever. So there are two solutions to this. And one of them is to say use state and then MO. So you could do that. You just abuse use state, which I think is actually a perfectly fine solution. The alternative is if you want to stick with use ref, you can't give it a callback. It doesn't have a callback. And we don't want to pass it here like this. So we'll just say use ref. And then we'll say if ref.current, or sorry, rather, if not ref.current, then ref.current equals that new mutation observer. So this is one exception. However, you also need to keep in mind that this is going to be running during the render phase. And that can, you want to make your render as fast as possible. And creating a new mutation observer, I haven't benchmarked it or anything, but if you had like thousands of these elements and each one made its own mutation observer, it probably wouldn't be great for performance. Like I said, something to benchmark. Yeah, that's something to keep in mind. So if you don't actually need the mutation observer until an effect, which is most likely, I would be really surprised if you somehow managed to need to use it before the React elements are committed to the DOM. So if that's what you needed, if you don't need it until an effect or an event handler or something like that, then instead of this still, so instead of the use state method, which also that's going to run during your first render, so that's not good. This will run during your first render, probably not good. So even still, you could say use effect or use layout effect if you really wanted to be sure. And then, you know, I shouldn't be typing it in Alfred, but there it is. So you do something like this. ESLint will probably get mad at you for this, but yeah. So this way, you at least your render is fast. You don't block the render by creating a new mutation observer, and then everything gets committed to the DOM, and then you are able to create that new mutation observer before you need it. And so even in those situations where it's like, well, I only need to make one. Oh, and of course you'll want to have an empty array right there too, so that it only happens on mount. Yeah, so even in those cases where it's like, I only need this as like a lazy initialization sort of situation, even in those situations, you're much better off putting that into an effect. So yeah, really strongly avoid doing or putting stuff inside of your render method for both concurrent feature bugs or concurrent, not concurrent mode, concurrent feature. No, it's not feature. What is it? I said it just like minutes ago, but yeah, concurrent, features. So for concurrent reasons and for performance reasons, keep side effects out of your render body and you'll be much better off. So does that answer your question, Lucas?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, sure thing. Now, if I could just take the last 10 minutes and put that into a blog post, just magically, boom, there it is. That would be great. Okay, sweet. Anybody else in Zoom have a question before I start looking around here?
Yes, I have a question.
Oh, we've got two.
I'm sorry, last comment about that thing. So if you ever make a blog post and you can actually think of a bug that will occur by doing this, it would be awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I could probably write some example code that shows a potential bug. Like you have an event handler that calls the latest version of a callback. And so we set that latest version of that callback to maybe like, I don't know. Yeah, I'm set it to something, and then so that event handler will call that. It is really difficult to figure out because I've never experienced something like that, like where maybe that callback has a value. Yeah. So like we have a use state in here, and that latest version of the callback depends on that state value, but then a keystroke comes in and changes that state value. And so now that latest version of the callback has a stale version of that state value. And now you're calling that callback with that stale version. So like, I think that's a situation where you could have a bug, but reproducing that bug would just basically be impossible. I can't, it would be, because it depends on how fast you type on the keyboard. And it would just be so hard to reproduce that bug.
Yeah, also can't handle those ref current updates during render and not like use effects and use layout effects. I think what can happen is also you can reference the same global state but have two different values pointed to it, because you might have a part of the render that already happened and is pointing to a value due to closure in the global state, and you have another one that stopped and then started again, but the value might have changed already. So you have that part with one state value pointing to the same global state, and another part that got thrown away and rendered again that's pointing to a different value, which is like the current value, and one might be pointing to a different value. I think that's what tearing, right?
Yeah, I saw that you shared a blog post here. Yeah, so take a look at that blog post. Oh, Daishi is just
very incredible.
Wow. This person is very smart. I think he's not the author, but the maintainer of Jotai. He may be the author. I think it was Paul that created Jotai, but boy, this person is very smart. Yeah, fascinating stuff. I'll have to look at that later. Cool. Thank you for sharing that, Yago.
No worries.
Cool. All right, Mohammed. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Can I share a screen?
Yes. There, go ahead.
Okay. Does it have entire? Oh yeah, entire screen. Okay, can you see now?
Yep.
I'm working on editor kind of like Gutenberg from WordPress. I have one UI question and one web worker question, if you want. My UI question is there is a hovering menu, and I implemented this too, but when I'm scrolling, it's kind of stays on the page, and then as you can see. And mine doesn't work like that. I test the what was it? A display. I can't remember.
Sticky?
But it's yeah, sticky. But the sticky position, it's occur a space here, a space from this div, and but this isn't working like that,
Yeah.
And the other thing is even the block that's opening, it's kind of like again working like this from the space. I tried the React. What was it from the creator of Remix React Rich UI? There was a observer on the page, but it didn't work as I intended. If there is any suggestion for mine is again like this, it doesn't.
Yeah, I know that this is a tough problem, and I thought that that Ryan had kind of solved this with Reach, but I'd never used that package. I think I used what is it, React Popover or something? Yeah. There's a package specifically for popovers like that to make sure they stay in screen.
Yeah, I tried them, and they are creating. I want it to be a portal because unless there would be a form in form again. Because, for example, the link, all the components are using React Hook form, and this is a form too. And if I use absolute position, it would be form in form and submitting a form inside a form. Then I should use React Portal to kind of make it outside the DOM to be a separate form. But when I use React Portal, I lose the absolute positioning of the element that I want to open. Yeah, that's kind of a all over the place.
I can see. So the problem is you have a form within a form because that text area is a form itself. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, this is a form that handled with React Hook form too, and the whole page, as you can see, oh god, this is whole page is form, and even this part is a form.
Have you looked at tried to reverse engineer what the Gutenberg editor is doing?
Yeah, the Gutenberg editor is kind of weird because it's it's a fixed position and adding pixel to the position, I guess. It's kind of laggy, you can see.
Yeah, they're probably using JavaScript for that then.
Yeah, but I have an idea, but it is, I think, so hard to implement. Getting the first ref position and from the top and the left, and then on a scroll adding position too. But it's so hard. I'm not sure.
Yeah, let me see if I can find that package I was talking about. I think it was called React Popover.
Popper, maybe.
Popper, yes, Popper sounds right.
Yeah. I used that. No, it's not solving my problem exactly.
Well, yeah, man, I'm sorry. I don't know. I mean, I try to answer questions as much as I can, but at some point it's like I would need a few hours to help you work on this. I don't have that.
And I have no problem. I have one more question. It's not
sure.
UI, I promise.
Yeah, sorry about that. I do wish that I could help more.
Yeah, that's a UI problem, And I have one more question. I'm using Next.js, and Next.js provide a blur data URL, as you can see. The blur data URL is a Cloudinary or other services that can give you blur low kilobyte size. And this gets on a string, but we are talking to our backend engineering team, and they're saying they are sending us the hash instead of the URL. And their reasoning is that when you want to get the URL, you are requesting for the URL again and getting the image, but it would be a larger task. for example, for 100 or thousands of images. Instead, they're giving us the hash value, and you know, there is no need to requesting for image URL again, if it makes sense.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. So what you mentioned Cloudinary, but you're not using Cloudinary, right? Or you are?
No. It's like it's kind of, you know, I want to show my purpose of blur data.
Right. Okay. I just want to make sure that I didn't misunderstand you. So you're not using Cloudinary.
No.
Okay.
We are getting the hash from the backend, not
From your own backend.
Yeah, not the URL data. Not the blur data URL. We are creating, as you can see, our own separate blur generator. But it's, as you can guess, it's kind of like the main thread. And I tried to move it to worker thread, and you know, passing with the same what does it mean? Shared memory. The, you know, the post message. The second argument is the we can clamped unit array, and that clamped unit array can be shared to our main thread without sending to the post message. But the problem is, yeah, blur data only accept a string.
Yeah.
And
you know. So and this is all running client side. Well, yeah, clearly.
Yeah. We are decoding this. We are decoding this with blur hash. You know, the performance, we test the performance. It has better performance because there isn't any request again to server to get the blurred images, but it locked our main thread. The best I can do it was to create a dictionary and store the keys and the values, and not, you know, generating for every render, but it's there. Yeah,
I don't think you would need to do that, because you could just use React.useMemo. So you wouldn't have to bother. Well, I mean, I guess if you were sharing, doing the same image in multiple components, then having a dictionary.
Yeah. We are doing, for example, when you click on the image, it's gonna be open a model, and the model, you know, we don't want it to, you know, create. It's a global object dictionary.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely that I would probably do that too. But your problem about the performance of the initial render is still a problem.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Let me think. So I guess I'm not sure I understand why the worker thread idea didn't work.
Because the on message would be the problem. For example, there would be a ref to the worker thread, and the worker thread, you know, the ref on message, for example, on the thread, you know, on message it gives a callback, but the blur data, it's wants us to get a string.
Right. Yeah. So you would have to make this component asynchronous, like, so have a loading state, which probably
that's again block the thread.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not going to block the thread, but it is possible you'd have a just a delay in rendering, and the loading state for something like that, like, it's probably really fast, especially putting it into a worker thread. It probably is barely observable. So I would probably not have a loading state at all, just like render nothing for that initial render, and then get the value out of the worker when it's done.
But so, if it would be has you know, a content jump, yes,
it's possible that there would be that. But I mean, so your choice is not showing anything, or being unresponsive and then a content jump when it finishes rendering, or being responsive and having the content jump still. I mean, the alternative to that is you have like an actual URL. Well, okay. So I guess the alternative would be your backend engineers just send you the full data URL.
Yes, definitely.
Um,
That's the easiest way.
So-
We are testing. We are just in a testing phase, and the benefit from the performance was a good amount. If it is this gonna worker thread gonna work, it benefits of us, quite much, I think.
Yeah.
Because there is a gallery, because this is an admin panel, and there are gonna be a 100 or thousands.
Yeah, I
It
see.
has a pagination, but
So just sending it over the wire is pretty heavy.
Yeah, there would be multiple connection to get the URL, but in this case, the worker thread, if there wasn't any content jump, definitely it is I think better idea. But we're just experimenting.
I mean, one thing that you could do is start this process of generating the blur sooner, like before this render happens. I'm guessing that this is rendered initially, though. Like when they land on the page, this is rendered. It's not like after they select something.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it would be hard to start it any sooner. But you could, especially if you have a dictionary and you know all of the URL or the hashes, you could start it outside of React just to get it started a few milliseconds earlier. You would still
you mean server-side props, you mean?
Yeah, I'm not.
It is next application. It is the next application.
I mean, if you do it and get server-side props, then that happens server-side, and so you're still, if you resolve the hash to the data URL, then you are going to be sending the whole data URL to the client over the network, which you mentioned is a problem for you. That is what I was going to suggest. Actually, was to do all of this stuff server side, but you mentioned that wouldn't work because the network you're worse off. So the alternative would be to just start processing all of these before React is even hydrated. So like as one of the first things that you do when JavaScript starts running is you kick off worker threads for these. And then inside of the media, you would still have to wait for those to finish, but hopefully they've started earlier. You know what? I actually kind of have an example of what I mean. If you want to,
yeah, sure.
Let me share my screen.
I'm stop sharing.
Okay. What the devil? Zoom is so weird. It's got this thing. There we go. Man, this is the weirdest thing. Yeah. Okay. So it is actually in the Bookshelf app. And I show it in render as you fetch in that exercise. And I think it is in our auth context. We'll look at that final extra credit and everything. So here, this auth provider is like our root or one of the first elements that's rendered. And we need to wait, because this is a 100% client-side application, we need to wait to know whether or not the user's logged in. And so if they're not logged in, or while we're loading to determine, we show a full page spinner. If there's an error, we show an error. If there's success, then we render the context provider and all the children and everything else. But we don't want to show this full page spinner. That's basically the same situation that you have, where you don't want to show like the loading state, which in your case would probably be nothing. You wouldn't want a flash of loading state. So it'd probably be better to just show nothing, but you don't want to be in that state for very long. You want to be very fast. And so before this exercise, I can actually show you what the before and after look like. What we did before was we have this use effect to go fetch the user. And what we change is we actually start fetching that user. We create this Bootstrap app data, which not only gets the user for us, we create this special API called Bootstrap to get us not only the user, but also all the data that they would typically need to run the application, like their list items and stuff. And we stick those in our query cache and whatnot. So yours would be very similar. notice that this is happening at the root of the module. And so, and we kick it off right at the root. So before, like as the browser is starting to execute all of our JavaScript and resolve our imports and all of that, one of the first things that we do is kick off this request. And then inside of our use effect here, we are using use async. You could actually use async if you want. That just manages the promise state for us. To say, hey, here's the promise that I want you to reference. And so you would have your hash of worker promises. And so you'd say, hey, just wait for this promise to resolve. And when it has, then update the state so I can re-render and say, okay, now we can show the blurred image. And that I think would work out pretty well. The challenge with this is that, or like the downside, I guess, is you only really save a couple milliseconds. Like,
yeah,
maybe on a slow device, you could save a little bit more time. But like the difference between when JavaScript starts executing and when React is finished hydrating the page and calls your use effects, it's not very great. You could easily test this by adding a console log performance.now right at the root.
And the finish performance.now minus.
Yeah, inside of a use effect. Yep. So you could easily see, okay, how long does it take on my machine? Maybe I throttle it back a little bit. How long does it take now? And so you could very quickly identify whether it's worth all the extra. I mean, it's not a lot of extra work. Like this exercise was literally just like move this up here. That was literally the entire exercise. So it's not a lot more work. But yeah, like it's just something to consider. I guess.
Watch your course. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
I'm gonna test it and
yeah. Good luck.
Maybe. Yeah.
I feel like it wasn't very helpful for either of your questions.
No, that's that. These type of questions, real world, they are weird.
Yeah.
Not makes any sense. Thank you.
Sure. Absolutely. Cool. Any other questions here in Zoom before I get to Aaron's question up here? All right. Sweet. So Aaron, a few weeks ago asked, here's the example of the render bug I was mentioning in help. I sort of remember this. Two examples. One is using descendants from Reach UI. The other is one Yago and I worked on. Yago's gone. Rats. Items is a number or an array of numbers. Wait, it's an array. See, this is why I use the array first, array with the brackets, the array generic, because I said number or array of numbers, but it's actually an array of those things. Yeah, I always put the array first, but that's okay. I know I'm an outlier on that. And is used to render a tree of HTML nodes in different position, make sure that the index that is registered from use descendants is correctly being sent to the right in the right order. So notes do. Okay, so I'm not sure. Yeah, I think if Aaron's not here, I remember thinking, I don't think that I can help with this, just because there's too much stuff in here and I'm not sure what's relevant. So Aaron, I'm sorry. You not being here makes it kind of hard. So the Reach app, huh? Let's see, Reach app. Yeah, I've never used the descendants feature from Reach, so I may not be able to help here. Yeah, sorry, I will be no help help with you on this one, Aaron. I'd need you to walk me through it so I don't have to spend so much time figuring out what's going on. Sorry. Okay, cool. I think that was the only one up here. Nope, just kidding. Oh, I think they're just responding to something. Okay. Here we go. Tobias or Tobias, sorry. Question, assuming you'd start from scratch, no sunken time into Angular or React, Blank slate, the current technology stats, which language and framework would you start with? Why that? Okay, I would absolutely start with JavaScript and React. And I have an article about why I love React so much right here. So you can read that. Enjoy. Okay, I think that was everything from up here now. Okay, Yago, how was your process of getting familiar with new code bases? Okay, I actually feel like I've written about this. Maybe. Maybe it was in an AMA answer, actually. No. I think it was like how to learn or yeah, something about open source. I can't remember. Yeah, I think it may have been an AMA on my GitHub, old GitHub AMA that I had. But yeah, my process of getting familiar. So a lot of what I actually, if you want to go really deep into something really wild, Slice.js was this project I was working on that could potentially, I mean, if I ever worked on it again, this was 5 years ago. Holy moly, that did not realize that was that long ago. But Slice.js was this really cool project that allowed you to take a code coverage report and the source code, put them together, and all you get out is the code that that was covered by the coverage report. Now, why is this cool? Let's say that you could generate a coverage report for your app code by opening up your app, clicking around a couple things, and then closing your app. And now you've got a coverage report. You see all of the lines of code that were covered by what you've done. And then you take that and you apply it to your project, and your output is only the code that was used when you did those things. So you just deleted all of the other code in your app other than what's necessary, absolutely necessary for those things to happen, including like if statements and everything, not just like modules that weren't used, but like ternaries, all of that stuff is just wiped away. And all you have left is the code that was used for what you did. That would be a great way to learn a code base, because then you would you'd say, okay, I am tasked with working on this new feature. So let me navigate to that feature, turn on code coverage, do some stuff, turn off code coverage, and now I have all that's necessary for that feature. That would just be killer. Really great way to learn code bases, and that was part of what I thought what Slice.js would be useful for. The other thing that I thought it potentially could be useful for is if you had 100% code coverage on your app, then you could slice out all like vendor code and stuff that you don't use, and like drastically reduce your bundle size. I knew that was more of a pipe dream, because getting that level of confidence that your code is working would be really difficult. But you could just collect coverage data on a fraction of your users. Like if you had the scale of Netflix or Facebook or something, you could collect coverage data on hundreds of or thousands, tens of thousands of users, and use that to slice out stuff that's not used in your bundle and send the sliced version. And you could have it automated to where like you'll follow key metrics, and if those dive down for the fraction of users that you send it the sliced bundle to, then you could just start sending the real one and then like figure out what you got wrong. And then I don't know, it'd be really cool anyway. And this was awesome. This was where I learned some really like amazing stuff about Babel plugins. So Babel plugin, oh yeah, let's see, transform, get sliced code transform. Yeah. Oh man, that was awesome. I learned a lot about Babel plugins from building this thing. So anyway, because we don't have those, to get to your question, we are stuck with the traditional method for learning code bases of trying to kind of do this in our minds. Like I need to work on this feature. Let me find the code that's relevant for that. And since the day I started, it was always, okay, let me find a class name that they were using and grep the code base for the class name. Oh, that's where that comes from. That's how it was with Backbone. These days, your class names are like mangled or something. So sometimes I'm looking for specific CSS properties. So stupid. If it's Tailwind, then like good luck with that. You have utility classes that they're like, oh, they probably don't use that utility class a lot, and look for that. Or you have like actually modern tools, and you can say, hey, let's look at our components here, and we can select this. And yeah, I've got dang it. So we've got a bug in the React Dev tool, so I can't see anything, but like you can right click on things or click on, I think this one, view source for this element, and it'll take you right where it is. So that's what I would probably do, is like, I'm working on this, let me find where that code is, get an understanding of what that code does, and just kind of like expand my knowledge of the code base over time, kind of naturally. The tests are also a useful way to figure out how the code base works. Sometimes if the tests are well written, and yeah, sometimes just like sitting down with somebody, having them give you a general overview of everything, so your brain at least knows what is possible. And then yeah, what else? I feel like there was something. Oh, and like you probably won't retain all of that, so ask them to come back again in like 2 weeks and help you again later. That might be helpful too. So okay, sweet. Rasul, you're raising your hand. Go ahead, and I saw that you posted a giant thing in here. What do you need?
Hi, Ken. My name is Rasul, and yeah, I'm actually working on a quiz app now. I recently tweet you about discount. I don't know if you remember me. Anyway, I bought your course, and yeah, I'm inside now.
Cool.
Anyway, so yeah, as I said, I'm working on a quiz app, and this quiz app I want to render now. I want first to now, as you see in the. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, sure, go for it. Let me stop sharing mine. There you go.
Okay, 1 second. Where is, okay. So this one. Okay. Do you see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So this is the URL. Where is it? Here. So this is what I get back from my API, from my backend. And so yeah, basically I want to render one question at the time. So this is the first requirement. The second requirement is there's any way to randomly render the answers. Yeah, so that's the second thing. I already done something here on my code base. This is very big. Oh no.
I liked it better that way. No, that's good enough right there.
Awesome. So yeah, I have questions. Here's the questions, and here is my current question. This is my states, and this is the logic for to get next question, and handle option click. There is a lot in one component, but I'm going to refactor that to separate thing. But anyway, I have also timer. So if you don't answer the question until current time, you get false and you go directly to the next question. So this is the logic for, and here I clean out everything. And here if you try again.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is the JSX for my, would you see how it happened, or you get the idea?
I get the idea. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, basically from this URL now, if I just fetch, I actually use my I'm using React query to fetch the data.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here is my URL. So here basically I get all the questions. Here I get just one question. So what I want is just to collect the selected data, what's user selecting. For example, he choose the C. There's a choice, and yeah, if he corrects, I give him point. If he not, I don't give him anything. But I want to just take everything he selected and put it in one state, and after that maybe I want to do redirect to other page to see result and things like that. I don't know if I clear on my question.
So
but
your question is right. You have the ability to show the questions, and you have the timer set up. But when the user answers the question, you don't currently have it implemented where you collect their answers and show them their score. And you want some advice on how to best do that?
Yeah, and other thing I want to just show now, if I do, if I just map through these questions, I get all the question, but I want to show just one question at the time. So in that case, it's kind of like, it seems like something like pagination. If you
you only really need pagination if there's too much data to show them or to load all at once, but I doubt that's the case here. So I wouldn't bother with the complexities of pagination. And I noticed you had a API for getting a specific, like a single question. I wouldn't bother with that either. Just get all of the questions, until you have a situation where, you have, like you're loading more questions than you'll actually use. So you have like different groups of questions. Then maybe you could have an API for getting a set of questions. But I wouldn't bother with an API that will get you just one question at a time. It's not a lot of data. It would be, you'd be better off performance-wise just to get it all at once. And the other thing that I noticed is your interval there. There are a couple potential problems with the way that interval is set up. And so you'd take and I'm not going to take time because that's not relevant to your question. But Dan Abramoff has a blog post about this called, I can't remember what it's called, but it's about set interval inside of a use effect. And it's on overreacted. You know what? I can look it up for you really quick. Making set interval declarative with React hooks. I'll just share that in here. So that could be useful to look at later. So as far as like showing one at a time, what you need is some UI state that tracks what question number they're currently on. And then you have all of the questions in an array, and you say, based on which question is currently, or the current index of the question that the user's on right now. That's what you've got, the current question right there. You just render, you have all of the questions, and you just render the one at the index that they're currently on. So that's how you show just one at a time. And then as they answer questions, you have another state variable that says what their answer was to each of the questions. And so it's just an array of answers. And then from there, you can derive state for what their score should be based on those. and you can display that score as they're answering the questions or at the end, whatever you want to do. But I have a blog post about derived state that might be useful to you. Well, I can't wait until my blog is redone. There's so many problems with my current blog, the way that it works. I can't wait until I'm done with the rewrite. But yeah, so you can take a look at that that blog I just shared with you on Discord. And there was one other thing that I noticed that's just a way that I would change the way your data structure works. So each of your, if you scroll up a little bit to your questions there, you have answer options. Can you have more than one correct answer to any given question, or is there only one answer that is correct?
Actually, I have another type of questions where you have two.
Mm-hmm. So it's multiple answers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think that for those, well, it could kind of go either way, but I would change this slightly to, instead of having is correct on each of the answer options, I would have as like a sibling property to answer options, I would have an array of correct answers, and it would reference the ID of all the answers that are correct, and that way you can so initially I was thinking, if this isn't a multiple choice situation, then you can have multiple that are set to true, and that's an impossible state. Like, that shouldn't happen. But since there can be multiple that are correct, I still feel like having separating the answer from whether or not it's correct, and making that be part of the greater question object itself, makes a little bit of sense. And then you can iterate through the correct answers based on what the answers they gave, and drive it. I think you're probably fine either way. My initial gut reaction was that there would only be one correct answer, but with multiple answers, it maybe makes just as much sense either way. So
I got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. So now I get the idea. So first we have to, so we have the current answer, but we get the data in one array, and based on the index in that array, we render the question. Is it right? Is that
That's right? Yep.
Yeah. So I got it.
Cool.
I got it. Definitely. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, sweet. So we've just got a little bit of time. Well, we're over time, but that's okay. I missed last week, so let's see. Thibaut, I'm not sure if I'm probably saying that wrong. I'm sorry. You can correct me. Saying here, I'm currently having flaky tests while testing React Query and MSW and React Hook testing library. Welcome to the club. Testing with React Query has given me a lot of pain. Version 3 is a lot better than version 2, though. And actually, on that note, I have a branch on the Bookshelf app that is migrate to React Query v3. That's one commit that shows you everything I had to do to migrate to v3 of React Query. It looks like a lot more than it was. There were just a few key concepts that I needed to propagate throughout the code base. But the reason I'm showing this is because in my setup test file here, this is how I clean up everything and make React Query happy. You'll notice, actually, now that I remember, I didn't have to do anything because React Query version 3 doesn't have the problems that version 2 did. So if we look at main, which is still using version 2, you'll see I had to do this wait for query cache is fetching to be 0. It's super annoying. And this query cache clear. Yeah, pretty finicky, really flaky, really annoying. Version 2 is version 3 is way better. So if you're not using version 3, I would strongly advise upgrading to version 3, because what you can do is, if we look at, let's see, it's my test utils. Where did I put that? I can't remember. Shoot, where is it? Test, there we go. App test utils. Oh, right, I'm just rendering the app providers. And in our context, query client, there we go. So everything was I was able to create this query client provider, which gives me this, yeah, here's my use constant thing. Use state, just grab the first item off of it. I love it. That's great. Yeah, so you create that query client in here and then render things. So by doing things this way, where you have a query client in context, when you render a React tree over here, you have a totally separate query client than all of your other tests. And so that query client can be garbage collected and thrown away. And you don't have to worry about like clearing the query cache or any of that garbage. It did complicate a number of things with some of my hooks that were typically using global, the global query cache. And so now I had to have a context to grab the query client so I could set the cache in different places and stuff. So it did kind of, but it was mostly pretty painless and way better for testing. So anyway, that's one thing. If you are using React Query version 2, definitely upgrade to version 3. It's because I have I use render hook twice in a test to validate both use query and use mutation, but I didn't find anything about that in the documentation. Do you think I should open an issue? Oh, okay. So calling render hook by itself is not necessarily a problem. When you call render hook twice in a single test, you're simply creating two totally separate React trees. And so they shouldn't be communicating to each other at all, especially if you're using React Query version 3. If you're using a global query cache, then yeah, they can impact each other. And that's fine within the scope of a single test. That's probably fine. The thing is that in the real application, you don't have two trees. You have a single tree, most likely, for most people. And so I probably wouldn't advise doing things this way. I would probably separate those two into two different tests, or I would do the thing that triggers both use query and use mutation behavior in the single test. So you'd have one render hook and then do whatever it is that the user does to trigger both of those things to happen. Yeah, without like seeing what you have specifically, I can't give much more than that. Yeah, hopefully that sort of helps. I mean, it could be missing documentation, and it wouldn't hurt to open an issue and see if they're willing to answer your question, and then you can contribute documentation back. So give that a shot. Okay, we've got a hand raised here. David, go ahead.
Hey, Ken. So I posted a question in the Discord. It's right after the blog post, the avoid nesting when you're testing post.
Oh, did I miss it?
Maybe.
Oh, sorry. There it is. I totally missed it. Thank you for raising your hand about that.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, I'll just read it really quick. Yes, this is very common. Integration test getting slower as the app grows. Yep, had to raise the just set timeout. That's super annoying. Yep. Yep, most render the entire app. Okay, yep, that's good. Context. Okay, yeah, this is a great question. So one thing that I'll just mention really quick, and since I've got this open, oh, where is it? It is in my setup test here. So I had the same problem in the Bookshelf app, and one thing that you can do to speed things up quite a bit is to set default hidden to true. What this does is it tells the by role queries to not do so much extra checking of things. This is not totally advisable because you get a lot of confidence from the by role queries because they check with the visibility of the elements, and if it's not visible, it won't return. And so that gives you a lot of confidence, right? Like if you're trying to click on a button that is display none, then your test will fail. If you turn this off, then display none will just be like, it's whatever, I'm still going to click on that thing. So like it might be worthwhile to try and run the tests manually every now and then with default hidden set to false, so that you just make sure you haven't made a mistake at some point. But that can speed things up quite a bit with the by role queries. The by role queries give you a silly amount of confidence, but they are pretty heavy. And especially if you, well, I think we kind of fixed that. I was going to say, especially if you're doing a find by role or a wait for, and then a by role query inside of that wait for, then people have had a lot of performance problems with that, but I think we fixed that a while ago. So yeah, anyway, that's one thing. As far as like whether to like change your testing strategy around the like how much you're testing, that can help. It's important to keep in mind that if your tests are running slow, it could be that your app is slow and you need to fix that. The other thing to remember is that JS DOM is quite a bit slower than a real DOM or a real browser. And so if you're just really having problems with your integration tests taking a long time, then you could move from Jest into Cypress, because Cypress runs in a real browser, so that that should run a little faster. It also is a lot more generous with timeouts and stuff. Ultimately, though, you'll probably I'm guessing that it will still take longer because Cypress it doesn't run tests in parallel, and it's just a you have to fire up the whole browser and everything. So you may not be better off totally, but Cypress also has some really nice developer experience stuff where you are working with a real browser and you can see what's going on and you can interact with things and stuff. So Cypress is really cool. The only reason I use Jest most of the time is because it runs my tests in parallel, and it has an like amazing watch mode. And so it is typically faster, but that's just another thing to think about. And as far as like changing from higher level integration tests to lower level, more component or unit tests, I typically will have like mostly happy path stuff in integration tests for and keep them scoped to a specific use case. My end-to-end tests are typically longer, and it's not just like one use case, but it's actually a series of typical user flows is what I do with my end-to-end tests. And so integration tests are a little bit more scoped, some specific feature. The problem that you'll run into with both end-to-end and integration is this concept of over-testing, where you are doing the same thing over and over and over again with every test. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it can be, because then if like one thing breaks, then all of the tests will break, and it can be hard to know, okay, which one of these tests should I listen to find out where the problem really lies. Normally that's not a huge problem, but it can be. What really matters with over testing is just the performance of your tests. So for example, if every single one of your end-to-end tests went through went to the home page, clicked on the login button, filled in a login form, hit or maybe filled in a registration form, hit the thing, and then you mocked out the email and you clicked on the link, and then you came in here and then you continued on your way. Like that's at least 5 seconds of an end-to-end test to wait for every one of your tests. That's not helpful. And in the context of an integration test, if every one of your tests is rendering like a giant data table, and that takes a full 500 milliseconds to render, that sort of thing in JS DOM, but like most of your tests don't use that data table, then like maybe don't render that data table for your tests. And so that would be a good use case for mocking the data table for your integration tests that don't care about it. And so that's something that you can do, is maybe you have one test that covers the integration of the bigger page to all of the things that it uses, or maybe like split that up into multiple tests. And then for any test that doesn't use some of the heavier components, you can mock those components out. And so you just.mock path to the module, and then return a fake version of the component that often I'll just do a div with an ID that says what that component is. And so what would be rendered there if we rendered it. So yeah, that can be a solution if you have like some components that are specifically kind of heavy to render. So yeah, like first start with performance tracking, like go and look at your app and do some performance analysis to see if it actually is slow. Maybe your tests are telling you something. And then if you can't really find anything that's slow in particular, then yeah, like, well, if there's nothing slow in particular, then mocking out individual components probably won't do a whole lot. Yeah, there's probably something in there that that is making things especially slow. It could be some of the things that you're querying for. I would put a like performance start and, or what is that? There's like a timer API in Node that you could use, or I think it's console.time, I think. So console.time, and then you give it some ID for the start, and then console.time, give it that same ID, or time end, and give it that same ID, and then it will log out how long that thing took. And so I'd wrap like the render in that, see how long it takes to render, and then each of your interactions, and find which piece of that is taking the longest. And then dive in deeper to figure out why your tests are taking so long. And once you found that out, you're like, oh, well, it's taking forever to render. And oh, like this component is the one that's taking so long to render. We don't even care about this component for this test. So you can mock it out for that test. Yeah, that could be one option. And then there is always the option of like, just don't, for the preferences modal, for example, don't render the entire app, just render the modal and test it in isolation. I will often do that if I have a component that has a lot of edge cases in it. So I'll have one test that just makes sure that I can open and close the modal from the app, and then have a bunch of unit tests on it to make sure that all of the features of the modal work in isolation. And so that's another option there. So does that answer your question, David?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Good luck. That is not fun to have slow tests. Not fun at all. And thanks to you, I also see these other questions that I totally missed. So I'm new to unit testing. My project manager wants us to use Enzyme. Yeah, don't use Enzyme. That's my resource. Seriously, like it is. I mean, I hate pulling this out. Actually, I love pulling this out, but I shouldn't. If we look at the 5-year history of these libraries, you'll notice that Enzyme has been popular for a long time, but it is declining. Maybe it's definitely flatlining and maybe declining. Testing library is by far the recommended tool. It's recommended by the React team. So your project manager, I don't know why they're giving you technical mandates, I guess. Maybe it's not a mandate. Maybe they're just saying, hey, try this. This is a thing I used. Tell your project manager, Enzyme may have worked when they were an IC, but it's not what we're using these days. So don't use Enzyme. That's my resource. The best resource is testinglibrary.com and testingjavascript.com. So give those a look. Okay. What's your opinion on Cypress component testing as replacement for Jest? You know a lot about testing. Yeah. Okay. So I kind of mentioned this earlier. I've actually never used Cypress component testing. And the reason is that I haven't really felt like I needed to have scoped down to this one component and test that one thing when I'm using Cypress. If I'm going to do the whole, like pull up the whole browser and everything, I don't want to have to deal with Cypress and like a special Webpack config so that it can load my my component and whatnot. I already have a way to get my component on the page. Just tell Cypress to go to that page and I'll test it, that component. But a lot of people seem to like that. So the other reason that I don't use Cypress for this level of testing is because the watch mode is not as good as Jest. Jest just has a phenomenal watch mode, and it's slower. Typically, I mean, if, like I said, JS DOM is slower than a real DOM, but there is a fair amount of overhead in getting the browser open, and also it doesn't run the tests in parallel. And so sans any like weird performance issues that you have with JS DOM, or also like if you need to use actual DOM APIs for different things that aren't supported by JS DOM, then that's a great use case for Cypress. But I just haven't run into the situation where I'm like, ooh, I really want to test this component in isolation, so I'm going to use Cypress component testing. It's pretty much, I want to focus on Jest for that type of level of testing. And if I really need to use DOM APIs, I'll just use Cypress and pull up my full app. I don't want to deal with their own like Webpack config, and hopefully it's configured the same as what I have and whatnot. I don't want to deal with that. So anyway, that's where I'm at there. There's a wait list in Zoom. Oh, it looks like you got in. Sorry, I didn't know that there shouldn't have been a wait list. Oh yeah. Sweet. Yeah, use mutable source is an exciting upcoming thing. Thanks for sharing that, Yago. Use mutable source, it will be really helpful for stuff like Redux and MobX. I think it'll probably help with React Query. Maybe. I'm not sure about React Query. Probably. I'm really looking forward to like the use context selector, where you can say, hey, I've got a context thing that has like a lot of stuff in it, but I only want a part of it, and I only care about when this part changes. Then I won't get re-rendered when anything changes. I just care about this part that changes. I'm not sure what the status is on that, but that would be cool. Okay, Mokshit is talking about React SFC. Data fetching on component level rather than page. Okay, this is great. Sorry, there's no question here, just kind of a statement of what you're working on. That's cool. You always work on fun and interesting things. I don't have time to look into it right now. We're way over time already. I left a comment on Emmett Boston's book. Yes, it was great. Yeah, okay. So I didn't read the entire book. I read a few portions of it, a fair amount. So I can tell you that what I read was great. And to be clear, I actually can't quite remember which parts I read. I just remember having read it and thinking, wow, this is great. So good stuff. So I can recommend the book. I can. And I feel like it would be worth your while. But yeah, as far as like what sort of interview I prefer, let's see, what is it? I've searched for this before. This is the type of interview that I prefer. And this is the type of interview I try to give. So give that blog post read, and it'll go into more depth than I can. I'll just say you the algorithms, challenges stuff. Basically, the interview should go sort of the way that the job goes. And if you do stuff outside of what the job does, then I think that's stupid. So algorithm challenges, I think that's worthless. Really great way to miss out on engineers that are really talented. So yeah. Oh, there it is. Thank you, George. Thank you for finding that blog post. How I learned. I knew it was like open source thing. Yeah, how I learn open source code base. Yep, I knew I'd written about it before. Okay, thanks for sharing that. Okay. Suggest a way to debug React library. Interested in understanding how internals work. yeah, you know what? I feel like I blogged about this too. Nope, it's not this one, but this is relevant. This isn't the one I was thinking of though, but that is relevant. I feel like there's another one. I can't remember what it was. Oh shoot. Yeah, I've got 181 blog posts. There's no way I'm going to find it. What did I call it? Yeah, I can't remember. Here, let's see. Maybe try using Google. Debugger. Oh, actually, it might be this one. Yeah, it probably is. Yeah, this actually might be useful for you as well. Man, there was one where I share like a GIF of me stepping through the debugger through React code and Angular code and Ember code. I just can't remember. Nope, that's not it either. Rats. If anybody can find it, let me know, because it's definitely relevant. But good luck with that. Hopefully that helps. Okay. We are toward the end. Data structure, algorithm, concept are important. It is if that's what your job needs you to do. And actually the thing is that if you know it, then you'll be more likely to use it than if you don't. And so to say, well, you should only use it if you need it, well, you might not know that you need it unless you know it. And so it's kind of a catch-22 situation. So I think it's worthwhile exposing yourself to what is possible with it, just like with any tool or with tools in general. If all I knew about was a screwdriver, then I would maybe use the back of the screwdriver to drive in a nail. But if I had once heard about this tool called a hammer, then the next time I run into a nail, I'd be like, oh yeah, there was this tool called a hammer. Let me go learn how to use that. And so exposing yourself to what different tools or technologies or concepts, what they're useful for, can really help you. You don't have to understand how they work or how to use them effectively. You just need to know what their purpose is. And then when you run into the problem, you're like, oh yeah, I heard about this thing that will enable me to solve this problem better. Then you can learn about that to solve the problem. And so it's learn on demand sort of thing. So yeah, anyway, oh, looks like you just edited your question. So not about algorithms, mostly about getting hired as a React developer. Yeah, so I mean, I have limited experience with this because I can only tell you how I interviewed as an interviewer. I never interviewed having experience as a React developer. When I interviewed at PayPal, the interview experience didn't really ask me about React at all because I said I didn't know React very well. So yeah, there wasn't a lot of React in there. It was all mostly about JavaScript stuff, which I did know. So yeah, like getting a solid foundation on JavaScript can be really helpful for getting just React jobs. Putting the time and experience to gain experience. So putting the time in. Yeah, I don't know. If you have no experience, then you get experience. So if I were in a situation that sounds like what you're describing, what I would do is I would spend 8 hours a day or as much time as I can at least spending time working on projects that are the sort of thing I want to do for my job, and looking for a job, applying to lots of different places. So I would spend like 2 hours working on sending my resume to places and responding to recruiters and stuff like that. And then 6 hours or more of my day working on side projects and beefing up my my work experience. just exposing myself to problems. And I do have a blog post that I can find. I know what it's called. It is how to get experience as a software engineer. So that hopefully will be a little helpful to you. Good luck. I know it's not easy. So, okay, we're done. Any last questions from Zoom? Okay, sweet. Yeah, I was just checking some comments, some folks that shared. So thanks for hanging out. This was fun. So a little longer than usual, but that's okay because I did miss last week. Yeah, my next time off is September 3rd. So we've got a couple more weeks of this. So look forward to that. It'll be fun. It'll be great. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks, everybody.